I'm Kathy Wallerstein. I'm the Associate Director of the Davis Humanities Institute, broadcasting from my kitchen table. And welcome to PhD Unlimited, the last one of our season and the first one that we've done online. PhD Unlimited is a career development series that launched in 2014. It's one of DHI's core programs for graduate students, providing them with resources on how to transition to postgraduate life. There's a whole kind of range of topics in the series. Writing a teaching statement was a recent one we had, grant writing, and so on and so forth. And we're very, very pleased to be hosting Cynthia Foster today for this very apt topic, curating your digital identity, which I'm very excited to hear about. So Cynthia, I'm just going to read your bio. Cynthia, for nearly 15 years, Cynthia has dedicated her career to communications and social justice. Specializing in storytelling, digital media, and nonprofit communications, Cynthia has worked with national civil rights nonprofits and socially conscious brands to launch dozens of campaigns and initiatives. Prior to joining the Feminist Research Institute, Cynthia led communications for the Women's Foundation of California, a leading public foundation with a flagship policy training program, and Equal Rights Advocates, a nonprofit public interest law firm and advocacy organization in San Francisco. Some of her proudest moments were chairing communications initiatives to pass key civil rights laws in California. As an independent communications consultant, Cynthia has focused her work on change-making brands and telling stories for the social good. Her clients include the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Immigration Law Center. Previously, she was also a journalist at The Recorder in San Francisco. Skilled in digital marketing, organizing, and content strategy, Cynthia is an accomplished connector of communities. Cynthia graduated from UC Davis in 2005 with a BA in English and political science. I'm really, really delighted to welcome you, Cynthia, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. This, much like the first online presentation for PhD Unlimited, this is my first presentation of this particular training online. So normally what happens when I give this training is I invite a lot of interaction, and it's fairly casual, usually a smaller group of people around a table who already know each other to some degree. So, you know, we may not be working under those circumstances right now, but I want all of you, to the degree that you're interested and able, to feel like we are, such that I invite you to take yourselves off mute and interrupt me when you have a question, or if you'd like to share something. I'll be asking for your thoughts and ideas at a couple of points throughout. So this is very much a conversation, not a lecture. I am not an educator. I think what I would like you all to hear in my bio and take into my presentation is that my career is dedicated to making things like big communications moments happen for people like you. People with ideas, people with interests, people with passions, people with projects. And taking what is usually a really impressive body of work that has gone unsung and taking it out into the world with a goal in mind. And that is not easy work. I had to teach myself. I didn't really head into communications thinking, you know, that this was a new career path for me. It was really just a job. I had a crappy job that I got rid of, and I got a really awesome job to replace it. And at that awesome job, I had to teach myself a lot of new skills because I had gone from journalism to communications, nonprofit communications specifically. So it was something that I kind of reverse engineered for myself, starting with, okay, what do I want to achieve in my new communications job, and kind of filling in the gaps of how am I going to get there. And that's really the gospel, so to speak, that I share in my communications work with people like you, is that, and you'll see this is reflected in my presentation, you'll see that I already believe that you know how to do this, that you already know how to cultivate your digital identity, or that you already know how to communicate your goals around your work and the information that you've gathered in your research. So, you know, that assumption is a pretty big one, and I wanted to make a point of stating it at the beginning. Make sure to level set that I'm the kind of person who thinks that you don't need to be taught how to do this. You need to be empowered to do what you already do in new settings. So on that note, I'm going to hop into a PowerPoint presentation, but same rules apply. Please feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me if you have any questions. Just because my face may not be the one talking or the one active doesn't mean that you can't stop my roll. So let me share this real quick and we'll get started. Can you all see this? Awesome. So I've titled this presentation, this training, Influences for Everyone. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. You'll see why, but I want to acknowledge one of the elephants in every room when we talk about communications, which is that people who are doing really cool, smart things often have a hard time talking about that. And people that are doing nothing often have a really easy time talking a lot. So the assumption that influence is for everyone really is flawed. But I want to take back what we can from that and acknowledge that all kinds of influence are not for everyone. But if influence is important to achieving the goals of your work or the goals of your career, then influence is absolutely for you. If it's strategic, then it's absolutely for you. So what does strategic communications mean? Strategic communications is like the new cute term for a whole industry, a whole economy, a whole army of public relations people who have showed up to tell everybody else that they don't know how to talk about their work or how to talk about their company or how to talk about their project. But I like to take a different tack and focus on what it really means to be strategic. And this is the core, the nut of what I can give you about strategic communications. This is what I'm trying to do every day. I'm trying to share the best message in the correct or appropriate channel, and I'm trying to measure my outcomes against goals that I have set before this strategic communications campaign or project that I've undertaken. And then I'm measuring those goals that I set with what happened afterwards. So the goals that you have to set have to be measurable. That's the key there. So this is the foundation of any good strategic communications effort. Whether you're, you know, the head of a big company or you're just setting out on your career and you need to make a name for yourself. This is what it all boils down to if you're doing it right, according to me. And I've broken that down into an acronym. I love acronyms myself. And this, to me, is something I remind myself of every day while I'm doing my communications work. What are my goals? Who's my audience? What messages am I sharing? And how am I going to execute the sharing of those messages? What are the tactics? And I think one pitfall that people fall into when they are developing a communications strategy, when they are setting out to make a name for themselves, a brand for themselves, one pitfall they fall into is jumping all the way to E, to execution, before they have given the time needed to think through goal and audience and message. So for example, one of the top questions that's going to come up right now in any presentation you give about anything is, okay, but how does COVID-19 affect this? And to my mind, what we've got with COVID-19 is a really awesome red herring for a distraction around execution and tactics. So if you're asking yourself, do I need to go online now because of COVID-19 and I'm trapped at home and I can't present my work in person and job interviews are all messed up and put off, and I don't know how I'm going to get my book written if I can't go out and interview people for it. All of these kinds of concerns that are percolating up, I think, because of COVID-19 that are communications related, are really disguising, I think, a battle that people have been fighting pre-COVID-19, which is, I don't want to take my work online. It's too hard. I don't know why I would need to do that. I don't have the time. And that argument is as old as the internet. That's that debate that you get in with yourself. And what the pandemic has really produced is another layer of stress for you to add on to that debate. But I am of the opinion, and this is somewhat controversial, and people are free to disagree, and you're free to pipe up with disagreements right now. But I'm of the opinion that pretty much all of us need to be online with our work. There are some exceptions I can think of course, because there always are. But the exceptions are few and far between in my mind. And I would say that if folks haven't taken their work online and haven't started sharing content via a social media platform or via writing in an online publication, for example, people haven't done that yet, there's probably a reason. It probably has to do with not knowing the goal audience or message. And if what it takes to spur us all into having these conversations about our goals and our audiences and the messages we should be sharing is a pandemic, then I guess that's kind of what it takes. But we all should have been doing this, and we all should be doing this already because of the importance of digital interactivity when it comes to spreading a message. So the conversations that you can stimulate online about your work are just one of the ways in which digital interactivity can really boost your brand, help you make a name for yourself, help you get a job, help you solve a social problem, help you achieve whatever goal it is that you've identified in your work. And the funniest thing about strategic communications to me, again, I've already kind of hinted at this, is that we've made a whole economy out of it. That now there may or may not be more PR people working for the UC system than there are tenured professors. And it's wild, the sort of ecosystem that has blossomed out of this notion that communications has to be done a certain way by certain people who know certain things and have certain gifts for spin and gifts for slime. But the truth is, or the truth as I see it, is that we all are strategic communicators every day. And I think that one of the easiest examples of that is just thinking back real quick to a tough conversation that you've had recently and how you prepared for it. Whether it was with a colleague, an instructor, a professor, or somebody you're at home with, or somebody at work, a student, perhaps, somebody who is bringing to you some level of difficulty in achieving your goal, somebody who's putting a roadblock up in your way. And how do you talk to that person? That's the epitome of a strategic communications conversation or moment, because you're thinking through your goal, which is, I want to get, here's a used car salesman. My goal is I want to get this car for as cheap as possible. My audience is this guy who I don't really know. My message is determined on what my goal is vis-a-vis where I'm standing. You know, he's asking too much, he's asking too little. I go into bargaining. And that's really how I choose my messages, based on the bargaining. And the execution, you know, there's classic, like, pretending to be an idiot and not know anything, or coming in really hard and aggressively in your negotiation. All of these decisions that get made to come to that point which these points happen multiple times every day, even when we are stuck at home, maybe even especially when we're stuck at home. And these things come up all the time, and the way you're handling them is exactly what strategic communications is. And so I think busting that myth a little bit, that you have to hire someone to do this for you, that, you know, okay, you've written your book and you've got your piece out there, you've said your piece, now you have to hire someone else to get people to read it. And that notion is completely false. Do you need good ideas and good advice to get people to read it? Yes. But is there some sort of special trove of knowledge that needs to be unlocked? No. It's all very basic principles applied with discipline, you know, consistency, and a mind for that specific goal. I think really talented communicators, people who are doing a really good job selling their brand online, or who are doing a really good job unearthing problems and fixing them, those people are being strong strategic communicators all day, every day already. And they may not have enough time to execute and to do all the tactics that are needed to get the message to the audience so that the goal is achieved. But that's a separate issue. That doesn't mean that you have to hire someone else to do it because you don't know how to do it, which to me at least was very refreshing to realize, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I've literally never been in the position of being able to hire someone to do any kind of dirty work for me. I've always had to do it myself. And so I was very thrilled to discover that I already had it in me. And I really hope to share that out with people as well, if for no other reason than to boost our enthusiasm. So you've made the decision, and you are going to be a strategic communicator. You are going to work toward your goal. You are going to identify the audience that you need to move you through your goal, to your goal, excuse me. And you've identified the messages, the nuggets of information and philosophy and motivation that will move someone from where they're at to where you want them to be. You've got all that together. You've made the decision, you're committed. What are you? Where are you at in the process after you've said yes? What next? You've said to yourself, okay, I'm going to use what I know about communicating with other people and about communicating about my work to achieve the outcome that I want, the social change that I want, the job that I want to get, the moment in my education that I want to get through. You know, I got to defend an argument I made, defend my research, all of these things. If you've decided that you want to achieve a certain outcome in those moments, in my opinion, there's almost no better way to do that, to get toward achieving your outcome. There's no better support system for you to have than developing within yourself this skill of thought leadership. And thought leadership and influence and expertise, they're all kind of like cousins, these three terms, but they aren't the same. They don't mean the same things, and they will not get you to the same places in your communications journey. An expert is somebody who's called to testify, tapped for their very specific experience in a reactive kind of way. We need you specifically, so you come. That's one viable opportunity for people with expertise, is to become a professional expert. Lots of people do it. It's a little different than becoming an influencer. An influencer is someone who can convince someone else to do something, whether or not the influencer believes in that or not, whether or not the influencer knows anything about it or not. So I love to watch YouTube. I watch makeup YouTube whenever I'm not, you know, doing something else. It's like one of my favorite pastimes. And that world is chock full of influencers. They're selling things often, you know, they got to pay their rent too. Sometimes you know they're selling things, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they really genuinely do love the thing that they're selling. Sometimes they're just selling it because they're getting paid to. All of this is happening in this really messy swamp of influencing, which is different than expertise because it's proactive. Influencers are pushing their agenda out into the world for reasons that they know and that are meaningful to them, but might not be the reasons that they're giving when they push it all out into the world. You know, we're all not surprised that somebody might be selling us something that doesn't work. So what is a thought leader if it's not an expert and it's not an influencer? Just one more time, even though we already talked about expert and influencer, I want to say what an influencer or a thought leader is not. Because there is a certain amount of respect and credibility that I give to thought leaders that I don't give to experts and influencers, just kind of right off the bat. And I think I'm very like the average person in this way. Studies have shown that when you take on the attributes that I'm going to talk about a thought leader has, you are more effective in changing hearts and minds. So a thought leader is not someone who talks a lot and says nothing. A thought leader is not someone who says just a little bit, but they're exactly right, but they only speak when they've been questioned. That's an expert. And a thought leader is not somebody whose approval, accreditation is up for sale. It's an individual identity that does not react to the markets. So this idea that thought leadership is akin to influence or a part of that yucky kind of marketing that is beneath all of us is, in my opinion, wrong. A thought leader is what happens when somebody who actually knows what they're talking about and has something important to say is passionate enough to try to be influential and to get other people along on that path. Or thought leader might have formerly been known as someone who's informed, someone who is a go-to person in their field of expertise. They're not just an expert, but they surface time and time again when people need to know something about a topic. And sources that are trusted, that have innovative ideas and turn those ideas into reality. So somebody who can identify a problem and somebody who can propose a solution and rouse people to join them on the journey toward the solution. A visionary who can imagine a better world and can lay out the map such that others can come with them. And it doesn't have to be a visionary on a big scale. I almost regret saying that word because I'm not talking about, you know, Jesus level here. I'm saying if you have something that you know a lot about and you've identified a problem, I focus particularly on social problems, but you've identified a problem within that research and you've identified a possible solution or a path to a possible solution. What is missing in this equation for you to succeed and achieve a social good is the group of people, the support that you need from the broader public. And that's where your thought leadership comes in. That's where you take a moment, or many moments, it's a lot of work. Take some time to really share your vision for the future with people who may or may not be on the same page as you, but are like-minded enough to be part of the audience that you're talking to. This is at once insulting and reductive and really informative and can prompt some soul-searching worksheet. And I deliberately use the same one with every professional field that I do this training with. Academics, politicians, corporate folks, authors, individual brands, people who are the brand. I've used this worksheet with all of them. And one of the things that I think could be potentially interesting, and like I mentioned, is, you know, a fair amount of work. So not something that I have planned to do today, because I wanted to make this like a sort of manageable amount of material. But if this rises to the surface as an area of interest for you, if you'd like to take this to the next level, so to speak, I've offered to DHI to do what is normally the after lunch portion of this in coming back with this worksheet completed and then going through a creative writing exercise where we in small groups write the story of our thought leadership niche in such a way, and I've done this with the Feminist Research Institute, and it's been really, really successful. But again, it's something that we've kind of done over a period of time. But we write the story of the thought leadership niche, which is this really fun, first of all, so corny but true, fun for me at least, fun but also really generating exercise where you can figure out the elevator pitch for you, not for your research and not for something you're trying to sell, but what is the story of how you became interested in or enveloped in your area of expertise? What kind of influence would you like to have? And what are your credentials? Where's the integrity? How can you demonstrate that you're in a position to be trusted? And that exercise in this worksheet really can help you get, by the end result, maybe a 2 to 3 minute elevator pitch style story of what your thought leadership niche is and what it's all about. And once you've figured, so let's fast forward. And normally at this point, we would break, there would be filling out of the worksheet. We would get back together and we would share out what's on the worksheet. Now, depending where we're at on time, when I wrap this up, and if folks are interested and if we've got a manageable number of people, we can go back and kind of, maybe one person could run through the worksheet for the group, and then we could talk about how that person would get started on the next step of writing that story of their thought leadership. But let's assume that we've all already done that for the purpose of this, just so I can share with you a few more nuggets about why developing your thought leadership is so important. So to kind of take this out of the theoretical, once you're a thought leader, how do you act? What does a successful thought leader do besides, you know, represent those innovation and integrity principles well? What else does a good thought leader do? And I want to focus again on the solutions, because this is another thing that very dramatically separates an expert from an influencer from a thought leader. An expert may very well have solutions, but that's not necessarily the crux of what they do. Their role is more responsive. This is what happened and why. An influencer doesn't really care about solutions. Solutions is not the influencer's game. The influencer might sell a solution for a thought leader that came to them to work on a partnership, but an influencer is not interested in a specific solution. A thought leader is. That's where the thought leader really takes off and gets their wings, is in the realm of innovating a possible solution and then spreading the information around that possible solution effectively enough to get the necessary people on board. And to me, in my opinion, there's no more effective tactic. Now we're back to the execution part of goal, audience, message, and execution. There's no better tactic for a thought leader to get their messages across than creating content. And when I talk about content, I mean writing articles, but I also mean sharing memes on Twitter or posting funny videos of dance challenges to TikTok. All of these things can be part and parcel of an effective thought leadership strategy. Because when you create content, hopefully what you're doing, if you're creating content that is strategic, you're advocating for some next step or some innovation, and you're really taking the conversation around your area of expertise to the future rather than back past looking. And I think, in my sort of ignorant and casual observation of the academy, this is sometimes where there are some struggles for scholars, is not being back looking. And I think there are really good reasons for that. And I could go into some of the political reasons why I think that is, and why the university kind of wants us all to be like that. But it really is the forward-looking, the vision for the future really is what separates a thought leader from an expert. And if there's nothing else that you take away from my spiel here, broadcasting to you from my 80-degree house in West Sacramento, that's the most important thing, is you have to have a vision for the future that you can share, that you can articulate to be a thought leader. And you have to be able to propose a solution for a problem you've identified. So say you don't have that solution. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't know if you saw the comment. There was actually a question before you go on further. Asking,
oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't. No, I'm on full screen. I should have mentioned that.
It just popped up.
Okay, great. Thank you for stopping me.
Yeah, and it's from Amber Davis asking if you can elaborate more. And I'm not sure if, Amber, maybe you want to elaborate more on your question.
Yeah, I can chime in terms of like the kind of being backwards thinking or historical piece. I think you were talking about like the academy having a bias maybe towards that historical reference, maybe, or maybe, I don't know if I was fully understanding. I was just trying to clarify.
It was a flippant remark, and probably one that I should have made, because it's one of those like flippant remarks that can like unlock a whole slew of things. But what I was offering was hopefully some honest and very loving critique of what I have seen in my work with academics and folks in the academy, which predates my work at UC Davis. I've worked with researchers and scholars for a long time. And one of the roadblocks that I've perceived anecdotally in these relationships is that people who are really focused on their research, on their scholarship, can tend to be a little reflective about, or a lot reflective about, what has already happened, and really able to identify the reasons, the context, the journey of how something happened, but are less likely in their communications, and not necessarily less likely in their minds, but less likely to outwardly share what the solution is to the problems they've identified, what the end of the journey should look like. And I come to this with a pretty heavy context around social good. So a lot of the times when I'm talking about what the future, it's how are you going to upend a system of oppression and replace it with something that works. That's not applicable in all instances. A lot of times it is, but that's not necessarily applicable. But if your research identifies a problem, and you are able to identify a possible solution to that problem, and you share out that possible solution in a way that is strategic and focuses on the audience, that's separating you from an expert. That's when you kind of you spread your wings and you take off as a thought leader. When you are sharing the solutions, when you are looking to the future, when you are imagining new worlds for people who don't have the information, the expertise, the context that you do to be able to imagine them. They need you to paint the picture of where we're headed if we cure this disease, or if we change this institution, or if we tell these histories better. If we do that, where are we headed? And to be able to share what that looks like, it's, you know, taking a lot from this idea of futurism. If you're able to share what that future looks like, that separates you from an expert who may not either want to do that or really have that vision of the future to share. Does that?
Okay. Yeah, I do get what you're saying overall. But I think there is like a battle around being radical in the academy. That's something that definitely is frowned upon. And when professors start to go up for tenureship, you know, that's pretty much regulated. If you're too radical, you're not going to be part of our institution. So it's definitely institutionalized, I believe, and then also to the lack of really pairing efforts with policy. I think that's a huge gap a lot of times in the research space. I think, you know, all of those relate to that. And that's something everybody privy of.
Amber, I'm sorry, I'm losing you a little bit, I think. I heard you up until maybe 10 seconds ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what part it cut off. But I really don't know where it stopped. But I'm just saying, you know, the lack of connecting work to policy, I think that's a huge gap too in the academic intellectual space. But just that conditioning very early on around tenureship, I think that sets a huge tone in terms of identity for most. And I have a lot of friends that are scared. I'm a postdoc right now, but they watch how they move very early on in their careers. And so, you know, but anyhow, but points taken. Thank you. And
Absolutely.
I'll mute myself.
And your point is very well taken as well. And, you know, my strategic communications vision, my thought leadership is a bit radical as well. It's, you know, it's not crazy. I did get a job at a UC, but I'm not a tenure track professor. So I completely get what you're saying. And to me, it goes back to the goal. The question that comes up is the goal. So if your goal requires you to be radical, there it is. You gotta be radical. And you probably will have the indicated, you know, professional and personal consequences. But if your goal is get a job, get something published, you know, you've got a much more manageable thing you want to achieve without having to offend folks. I really like to say, okay, how are we going to change the world? And I find that the academy is a great place to go. Well, maybe not the academy, but I find graduate students for sure to be great people to talk to about how are we going to change the world. And those ideas to me are overlooked by wide mainstream society. There are people I work with from all fields, high paying, low paying, no paying, and so many who are relegated by kind of administrative rules to a certain station in life have outsized things to say, things that go beyond their station. And I love finding those people. Those are the people that I really want to help, you know, tell their story or achieve their communications goals. But that is an extreme example on a spectrum of many examples. Again, we all make strategic communications decisions every day. Not all of the elements of your thought leadership have to be radical to be important. They just need to achieve an end. And I always think the ends are more meaningful when they're community-based. But I think this strategy, this recipe applies to folks who are trying to make other things happen too. If you're trying to guide someone into a decision, into a different way of being, I think the strategy of developing your thought leadership is an important one to embrace. But, you know, I totally hear you, especially at the public university. You know, it's tough. It's super tough. And I think I had initially on this presentation, I had titled it the Strategic Communications for Researchers, Scholars, and Recovered Academics, because I do think there is a very real tension between speaking your truth about what you know needs to happen in your area of expertise and what that will mean for your brand, for you personally and professionally. And that is yeah. I just want to, I've been going on about it at length because I completely agree. I completely see it. And I think that the way to address it is to be really, really honest with yourself about what your goal is. And then to figure out who your audience is. Who do you need to motivate to achieve that goal? And if you need to be radical to achieve that goal, you need to be radical. And if you need to be well-liked, you know, by the big building, then that's part of the goal. And I think that honesty can really make us feel like that honest assessment of what our goals are can really make us feel better about making these decisions too. It's kind of it's soul searching in a way, which is really what this worksheet is about too. You're searching your expertise for where is your niche really? What do you care about? What do you have credentials for? What do people think you're good at? What do you think you're good at? Where do all of these things overlap? And that's where you find your niche. And it may not be what you think either. It may not be the chief thing that you've been researching. It may be something else. You know, somebody who is studying in a hard science field, for example. We fund a couple of researchers in STEM at FRI. And somebody's working in STEM and they're in a bioengineering field that's super crowded and clogged, and there's a million people, and the chances of them sharing their vision for the future, which isn't that unique anyway, and being heard are slim to none. So what's the thought leadership there? Is there some? Probably not. Maybe not. Maybe there is, but maybe not. But is there something there for that researcher on something else? Like why there are so many barriers to being a thought leader in their field? Is it structural? Is it identity based? Is it something to do with the science? Is it something to do with the knowledge? Can you take that experience of not being unique enough or not being you know, shining star, a shooting star? Gosh, I couldn't think what I was thinking of. If you're not a shooting star in your field, then how do you become a thought leader? Well, you might think about the barriers to becoming a thought leader in your field or becoming a shooting star in your field. And you may find some source of expertise there. Or you may find some thought leadership around the implementation of something. Or you may find some thought leadership and some critique of the institution writ large and what kind of radical change you might want to take. Yeah.
Cynthia, you have a question.
Yeah. Here, let me pull it up.
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea, huh? Cool. What tips do you have for academics that feel they lack social skills and need to branch out to be able to brand themselves and communicate with others? I'm STEM and feel my communication skills are lacking. Well, I kind of want to make fun of myself right now just because I don't have a lot of social skills. I've been like an awkward, attention deficit disorder, introvert my whole life, and social skills have never been my strong suit. Which, haha, how did you end up here? Goes to show you, right? It's not about the shiny marketing Instagram stuff. It's about what are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? So one way to really like get this head on, Brandy, is to think to yourself, articulate your goal, what you want to achieve, and really ask yourself, what skills do you need to communicate to your audience about your goal? And are you for certain that you don't have them? And if you're certain that you don't have them, do you have an equivalent, an accomplice skill? Or can you kind of substitute in something? So say you're terrified of public speaking, which I am. I had to represent myself in traffic court once because I totally did not deserve the ticket. And I had stage fright unlike anything I've ever, I can't even describe to you what it felt like. I hate public speaking, hate it. So what I've done to kind of substitute in for that lack of a skill is I've really developed my writing. And I really much more lean on my writing than I do my public speaking skills. So distill down, what social skills exactly do you need to achieve your goal? Do you need to be able to talk to chairs of committees? Do you need to be able to talk to middle school students? Do you need to be able to talk to policymakers? Who do you need to be able to talk to achieve your goal? What skills do you need to talk to them? You know, you don't need social skills to talk to a lot of the people that I just listed there. Most of them don't have them either. Like policymakers, for example, they don't have social skills either. That's where people who don't have social skills end up. That's because they hired other people to have social skills for them. So it may well be that you need two things. You need to be able to write and you need to be able to public speak. And if you can't do one of those two things, you need to figure out something else that you can sub in. If you can't public speak, maybe you can create art. Maybe you can program events. Maybe you can lead a really killer book club. What can you do to sub in for what you've honestly assessed that you think you're lacking? And I think that honest assessment is important too, because just because you're not like good at parties doesn't mean you're not a strategic communications prospect. They're completely separate. Terrible at parties right here. You're welcome. I hope that was helpful. It was I felt a little vulnerable for a second because I was like, oh my God, I have those same exact worries. So I had to get over my own feelings real quick. But completely understand where you're coming from. And, you know, I feel like sitting down, honest assessment, way to handle a lot of these problems. And you don't have to be everything to everybody. The director at FRI, yes, exactly, imposter syndrome warrior. The director at FRI is somebody who I'm really encouraging a lot to think about all of the ways in which our community, our network, our people, the FRI network, may have things to offer that have historically been overlooked on campus. So what does a feminist researcher have to offer to the party? You know, and I've been encouraging us to really think about that because there is so much there, even if we think people may not want us at the table. The question is really just, you know, what is my strategy? How am I going to get over or get under or get through? Are there any other questions while we're here? feel free to speak or type, whichever you like. I don't know, or maybe you can't unmute yourself. I'm actually not sure of that. But any other questions?
You should
Shall
be
I
able
keep
to, no?
Yeah?
Can people unmute themselves? Yeah,
Awesome.
looks like it.
Okay, well, let me just dive right back into
Well, I
a
think
couple more
Ashley,
things. We're actually like almost at the end.
I think we actually had a question.
Oh, yeah, great.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question to think more, like, let's say it's less community oriented. Let's say the problem you're trying to solve is networking and getting a job and just generally presenting that work in that way. Could you kind of walk us through how we would think about these ideas of the game concept to, let's just say, general networking online, especially now that a lot of conferences have been canceled and just that kind of new online environment? Because basically my presence right now is I have a department webpage and a few contacts that way, but in terms of thinking strategically about networking and being that thought leader in the networking concept, I don't know if that's too narrow, but that was just my question.
No, I don't think that's too narrow at all. And I think if the goal is to get yourself out there enough, get your work out there enough to be, considered a viable employment option, or to get opportunities to connect with folks who might be able to create opportunities for you or with you, people who you might be able to write grants with, for example. If those are the goals, it really does still tie back to what you're trying to achieve with your work. And so I really do still encourage you to try to think about your vision for the future and to try to have that available to you as a tactic. So now it's not the goal anymore. Now the goal is not to, reverse the climate crisis. That's not the goal anymore. The goal is, for you to get out there and get your work known. But reversing the climate crisis and talking about that, being a thought leader about that, might be a tactic for you to achieve that goal, such that if you think you need to be known to get a job, and if you ask me, I would say yes. I think that folks who have an online presence, a brand identity, are more employable in this realm than folks who don't. It's the same as publishing, I would argue. It's like micro publishing, creating content online. And I think it's a lot easier to be successful if you create that content about that vision for the future. So I'm sorry, I'm not familiar and I don't know what area you work in. Could you give me an example and tell me what you're researching and what your area is?
So I'm a graduate student in the English department, and I look at really old literature like Shakespeare time and how it relates to agriculture and colonialism and just the political ecology that goes into colonialism and those types of writing. So that's me.
and your critique of colonialism obviously plays a part in this whole identity, right? There's a critique of colonialism in there, right?
Yeah, and also that we don't include environmental concerns and ecological concerns in our discussions of colonialism at that time. We just kind of like, oh, they're colonial, oh, they took resources, oh, that's bad, but they're not asking what's that interplay.
Right. And when you are thinking about the importance of those questions, is there a kind of, not necessarily utopia, but a world that comes up for you where that interplay is discussed and those connections are made and out in the open, and how that might change what colonialism is either now or in the future?
That's a good question. I think it fits with the idea that I was trained to be very past looking and talking about context rather than you know, but that's something I could like think about. How would that look
Right.
like?
We all could.
Yeah.
I believe that we all can. And I think that's what makes the difference in this content that you create online. So if you want to revitalize if you want to not even revitalize, if you want to vitalize your identity online, if you want to take it beyond the biography and the description of your work on your department website, I think the the most powerful, the most potent way to do that is to be able to articulate your vision for the future and what it all means. And if that is possible, if you could conceive of that world and communicate it, how that ties into your job search is you're able to share and prove that there's more to your analysis and therefore your teaching and your research than the academics of it. There's a strategic communications element to it, where you're able to move people as a result of your work. And it can be a small amount of people in a really narrow audience that you're trying to move. It doesn't have to be a matter of pop cultural import. But if you can embrace those pop cultural, if you can embrace the way pop culture can invoke emotion and move people to do things for better or for worse, but if you can embrace that, that differentiates you so dramatically from this academy of past looking that it will, in my mind, it's almost a guaranteed audience builder.
Right.
I don't want to say that any solution is like out of the box going to work great, but I think it out of the box might work great. And I've certainly never seen it not work.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking some time to think about how you might articulate that vision, I think really makes it so much easier to explain to people and decision makers at that, why you need to exist. Why within this system do you need to have a part and a role to play? And I think a big reason of that why is what you could achieve with your really specific and rich knowledge, expertise.
Okay. Thank you. That really helped.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cynthia. You know, it's just about 5 o'clock, and I wonder if we want to get a sense of whether people would like to do a follow-up. I mean, a few people have already left, but it's up to you, Cynthia. Do you want to sort of get a sort of show of hands, or at least maybe people could just text yes if they're interested?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do it in the chat, and that way we can remember everybody's names and I won't have to write it down. But it's totally cool if you're not into it.
You can also wait, let it percolate, and then we'll send out, either an announcement or a feeler, or I can send an email to everybody who participated, who signed up.
Sure.
As long as they signed up.
Yeah, sure. I think that makes sense too. But I just want to share with the attendees that it's okay if you don't want to learn more, because I think there's a lot just from this presentation. And I'm going to send this as a PDF to Gina, so you all can keep all of this for your records with the worksheet as well. I think there's insights enough in here that if you just want to kind of take this presentation and you've learned something from it, or I hope you have, that's great. But if you'd like to follow up, which again looks like working on this worksheet, getting together, sharing out, and then going through an exercise, creative writing exercise that, I'm a dork, but it's really fun. I'd be happy to do that, particularly because I've never done this training online. And so I'd like to, kind of experience that, and if you all are willing or interested in doing that with me, I would be more than willing to try to make it happen. So yeah.
And this would be sometime in the fall. I just want to
Yeah,
clarify.
I think because really I think what would be best is some time to work on this worksheet and some time, like you said, to reflect. Not even to work on it, but to reflect. So I think like even if we came back in 2 weeks, that wouldn't necessarily be enough time for people to have reflected and processed. So, you know, definitely. And I think, you know, if it weren't summer, I'd say let's get together in a month, but I think next quarter will probably be what works best. So, and this is, you know, possible, I think, with just a couple people or more than that. So we could break out into smaller groups, I think, if more people were interested. Ideally, it's like a handful of people, but we could break out. So yeah, I think that would be great if you all are interested. I see some people in the chat who are already interested. Catherine, thanks for offering to facilitate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you all for having me. I have to do my due diligence real quick. Let me show you how you can stay in touch with me. We are on Twitter. FRI loves Twitter. Please come be on Twitter with us if you want. We have a website where we post events, ours and others, blog posts. We've got a lot of great thought leaders on staff, and we publish some really great examples of thought leadership on our website. And if you have any follow-up questions, you want to know more, or you want some personalized advice that you didn't feel comfortable sharing with the group, just feel free to email me. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.